I hope, to have, at the end of the talk that I'm giving to all of you, to have put some thoughts into your mind that you can carry out of the room. And then, apply those to really improve the cybersecurity posture of for yourself in terms of the cyber hygiene that you practice for whatever activities that you do, and for the organizations that you work for. One of the things that I used to tell, I've been in training for some time as a faculty at an institute called the Advanced Level Telecom Training Center. And then, in the training, what we do is we give a lot of material. Presentations would be there, copies of those presentations, a lot of material. And people carry them, and they ask for it also. They say at the end of the session, "Sir, can we have a copy of the presentation?" They say, "Can we have a handout?" Normally, and I've also done that. And, I carry it back into my room and then keep it on the side, hoping that, thinking that tomorrow I'm going to read that and get myself familiar with it. But then you get so involved in your day-to-day activities that, after some time, because something else comes, you put it behind. And later on, over a period of a month or two, you would find it, you wouldn't be able to trace it out. So, in training, which is, resident in handouts, is no training at all. Because it actually, you have to practice the skills, and then only it makes a difference to the society in which we work or the organizations which we work in. So we have to internalize, whatever training is there, and then the skill sets that are there and practice them. It's very important. So, and when we have a lot of things, you tend to not be able to do it. Let's hope that, there are one or two points that each of you, with your own perspective, are able to carry forward, internalize it, and then use it to improve the cybersecurity posture. So with that, some thought on the top of the mind, which is generic, nothing to do with cybersecurity. It's applicable to anything, any other skill sets that are there. I would like to start my thing. This, of course, here we're talking of cybercrime. And when we talk of cybercrime, generally we look at citizens being affected by frauds that are happening. A lot of phishing and wishing attacks that are taking place, and people are getting defrauded, mostly of money. And that is something that, is top of the mind of most people. And there's an initiative of the Government of India called the Indian Cybercrime Coordination Center, I4C, where you can dial in with a number called 1930. And I hopefully in this audience, most of you would be aware of it. If you're not, I'm telling you this, the 1930 is a number that you can dial in and then report your complaints. And, glad to see that over a period of last couple of years, there's a sea change in the way that, I4C has been functioning, in the sense that started off as collecting, the complaints, because in the back end, it's the state governments and state police which has to support it. Law and order still is a state subject. So it's a good aggregator, but on this back end, it has to support. But, one thing good they've done is to integrate all the banks onto a platform, and which is helping in, once you give it, to stop the payments as they go along at one part of the chain in which the payments flow. And there has been some recovery that has happened. And it's a platform that continues to improve over a period of time. So when you talk of cybercrime, that is something that that comes to mind, most of us. But from a national level, when you talk of cybersecurity, it has national security implications. The implications at the level of the enterprise also that we talk about, and then, of course, at the citizens that are there. And when you look at cybersecurity, we have to, attack it on all the fronts for it to make a substantial difference. Just now I was talking to one of my colleagues there, and he was asking, what are you going to speak about? And then about cybersecurity and per se. So what I was telling him is that, cybersecurity is not like any other aspect of national security. It is, of course, he was very curious to know what is the government doing about it. Yes, there is substantial amount thing that the government should do. But especially in cybersecurity, it's a whole of nation approach that is required to be done, and a holistic approach that is required to be done. It's not like, as I was telling him, that like the land borders, have to be protected. We can send out the army to protect our land borders. And that is done. You train them properly, equip them properly, and have a good strategy and processes in place. And then, you take care of land borders. In cybersecurity, it's not only the government, because it's actually penetrated right into the heart of the country, into all the aspects of our functioning. And for us to protect all those activities, it is required that it's not just governments that have to be active, but everybody in the country has to be active in this area. All the enterprises have to be cyber secure, and all the citizens also have to be aware of the cybersecurity practices that they have to practice. And cyber hygiene is to be inbuilt across the country. So that way, cybersecurity is entirely different. So when we look at cybersecurity, at the top level, when we're looking at it, there are two dimensions to that cybersecurity piece of it. One is you look at the quality of the systems that are getting implemented, all the IT systems that are implemented, and the cybersecurity architecture that it has. So whether they follow the standards or not, that's an important component. So if for us to be having a certain level of assurance of any system, like whenever you purchase anything, the level of assurance you get is because that that there are certain standards that it complies to. So when it complies to the standards, it means that there's a performance guarantee that you get out of it because it complies to those standards. Similarly, for cybersecurity also, if we have a set of standards and then the products comply to those standards, and there's evidence that they comply to those standards, then you can have some assurance about cybersecurity. So that's one dimension, complying to the standards and the robustness of the cybersecurity architecture. But that itself does not guarantee cybersecurity because the systems are so complex that any amount of testing will not be able to find out if there is a malicious code or malicious code that's inserted into a product by a actor with malicious intent. So if somebody has malicious intent and then deliberately he would put it, and your testing would show that it complies to all the standards. But then, it would have some code which might get activated at a particular point of time. So the second dimension that comes to have a trusted vendor, trusted source, in the sense that, it was mentioned that I look after the trusted source part in the government, is that the source is it trusted so that it doesn't have malicious intent. So these are the two dimensions that have to be taken care of. So at the national level, when we looked at it, especially with the 5G coming in and a lot of IoT deployments taking place, you'll find that there's a ubiquitous deployment of IT infrastructure that's getting deployed. It is not that, it's pertaining to the MIT or to the Department of Telecommunication systems that are being deployed. Across all sectors, you will find that complex systems are getting deployed. And, any breach in that, you would find that it's going to affect that particular sector. So it was required to, relook afresh at how were we approaching these systems across the country, and then say that that's where the National Security Directive on the telecommunication sector came about, where they said that only trusted products from trusted sources would have to be inducted into the telecom networks, and the government would determine what are those trusted sources and what are those trusted products. The trusted sources and trusted product is only looking at the intent part of it. In terms of, we look at the companies, the ownership pattern of the company, the shareholding pattern, who are the board of directors, where are those companies' headquarters, where do they manufacture, where is the R&D happening, the bill of materials that is there, that is regarding the companies. And for the products, with the bill of materials, the software BOM and the hardware BOM which is there, where are the different components coming from? Are they coming from trusted sources themselves? So this is one exercise that goes on for all the companies and all the OEMs that are there and all the products that are coming in. So just because a product comes from a trusted source need not necessarily mean that the product is trusted product, because many of these trusted sources have manufacturing facilities in countries of concern, have research facilities from countries of concern. So a product may not necessarily be a trusted product. So that is the framework into which it's been working. It started off in 2021. After July of 2021, they were only supposed to put trusted product into networks. We have created a portal called the Trusted Telecom Portal, and all the stakeholders are onboarded onto that. And this is an exercise that's been happening. Now, looking at that, we find that other organizations also, which didn't have a mechanism to have this level of assurance, have started approaching and finding out whether the facility that's been created out of the portal can be used by them. The Indian Railways, for example, have requested us, and they have onboarded all their general managers across the country to actually put companies for evaluation, products for evaluation, and also take benefit of the already evaluated companies and products on the portal for their own recruitment purposes. Procurement purposes. A similar exercise is also being done in the power sector. They have come up with what is called a trusted vendor system, and it is a work in progress, and it is happening. So that is one part, So this, of course, just because a vendor is trusted does not mean that the product is secure, because that is not really looking at the standards part of it, the architecture part of it. See, you look at many of the breaches that have occurred across the world, and especially in the Western world, which are repeatedly reported. And you look at the underlying software and hardware infrastructure that is there. It is not that the laptops or the servers or the software operating systems applications are not developed by what would we call trusted sources from their perspective. They're all Western companies who have delivered those products, but still the breaches have happened. So just because a source is trusted does not mean that it's cyber secure. The cyber security comes from, again, the practice of having a good architecture and also the internal processes that are there, both in terms of the development activities and also in terms of the deployment activities and in terms of the operations that happen. So all of these have to be taken care of for the security to happen. So under this dimension that you look at it, one area of great concern is that these breaches keep occurring, and these are all reputed companies which are supplying these products. If you look at the brand names of the products, underlying products that are there, they are reputed brands that are there. So there's something wrong, that is there. And this is where, and I'm harping on this in repeated forums, in multiple forums, and I'm going to harp on it again today. And that is secure by design. We have all been talking about secure by design. It's not that we have not been talking about secure by design, but on ground, is it really happening? So our educational institutions which are training our engineers or software developers, are they being trained on developing secure software, and are secure by design principles being used? I don't think that is the case. And that is basically because there's a fundamental disconnect between the developers and the security establishment. They are two different entities altogether. And here again, and I harp on that, and from personal experience, because I've also been into this realm of developing systems and getting some vendors to come along and develop systems for us. And this I've told in other forums also. When we sat with them for the system that we're developing, there was a list of requirements that have been listed out based on which they came up with the architecture. But when you look at that requirement, security was not a requirement in that list. So when we told them that for us, security is also a functional requirement, in addition to all the other functional requirements that have been listed out for the system to deliver on, we told them that security for us is also a functional requirement and listed it out, and we said put it there on the top. And then also told them that all the stakeholders who are going to access the system for running it, plus all other modules that are going to be working on that, interacting with each other, treat each of them as a adversarial stakeholder, adversarial module, and then design a system so that even if there's a breach because one of those adversarial stakeholders or modules is going to try to compromise and it successfully compromises, there should be no catastrophic breakdown of the system or catastrophic loss of data. It should be an isolated breach that is there which we can detect and then mitigate. And that is the philosophy on which the system has to be designed. When they came back, the architecture of the solution that they demonstrated to us before actually development started was entirely different from what they started off when they did not put security as a functional requirement. So I think one of the messages that I want to convey to all of you and for all of you to carry together is, to make security as a functional requirement for all the projects that you execute. And for the security establishment within your own organization to be associated with the development team at the time of design and conception, so that the product development, the design of the product is robust, and also the development also is robust, and you actually get delivered a secure product. Breaches will happen, whatever you say, and that is something that you would have heard in multiple fora. Breaches will happen, but how do you actually isolate that breach, minimize the damage that occurs because of that, is something that we have to target for. And that secure by design is one thing very important. So when you look at the two parts of the security, one is the proper architecting of the solution, the secure by design principles, the zero trust architecture, all of that has to be inbuilt into that. That is one part. And also try to identify trusted vendors whom you can trust, that they do not have malicious intent and who would supply this product. So these are two things that have to be taken care of when you're looking at the products that you're talking about. Okay. The second, the next point that I would like to point out is the personnel part of it. And this is another thing that I keep harping on. You put the right person in the right place, and he will take care of everything. A lot of time, we look at budgets, we look at technologies. All of us don't have the domain knowledge. It's not that we are all experts in all the topics that we deal with. You get the right person to take care of cybersecurity within the organization, get the right CISO and have a team with him. And tell you that he will take care of all the things that are required to be done. He will identify what are the technologies to be deployed. He will identify, what is the type of skill sets that are required in the team. He will also identify what's the type of budgets that are required for that. So that's important. The first part is to get the right person in place, and he would take care of it. Getting the right CISO in place, especially coming from the government. I know in some of the places we have a person who has got domain knowledge in some of the topic would actually be looking after the charge of the CISO without having a clue about what is required to be done. So that actually creates a problem. So this is an important part. And, one other thing is to have a security policy in place. Many organizations do, many organizations don't. Having a right CISO would help in getting the right security policy in place, because he would understand, what are the components of the security policy. And again, from personal experience, I would like to share. I come from a background in the telecom sector, and I was a DDG security in the Department of Telecom. And there, one of the license conditions was that all of the operators should have a security policy. 2011, there was an amendment to the license conditions. And after that, it was said that it should have a security policy. And then within a period of, I think, some 3 or 4 months was given to all of them to communicate the security policy to the department. So sometime later when I joined there and took charge of the security, I just asked for those security policy documents to have a look at them. The license conditions specified that, the security policy should be there, and security policy should have, provisions for risk assessment, vulnerability management, and something else. There are 3 things that were mentioned in that. Now, when you are in a compliance mode, that you have to comply with the license conditions, without really looking at that, whether I am cyber secure or not, what would you do? You would create a single page document. I say, this is my security policy. And we follow the principles of risk management, vulnerability management, and that's all, one page document. You are in compliance because you have a security policy. So and I'm telling you this practical experience, 1.5 page document, security policy documents submitted by the service providers. There were certain service providers, very professionals, around 250 page document, which actually detailed everything, right from onboarding people to onboarding systems to password management to change management. All of those things were enumerated in the security policy. So we had such a wide range of security policies that when I looked at it, targeting. So that's when we thought, why don't we come up with a minimum baseline for a security policy? Then we had an industry consultation, formed a committee with industry, and then came up with, in 2017, September, with the approval of the minister, we came up with a minimum baseline for a security policy for the telecom sector. Of course, that was there. So I think, there's a case here, I think, that because what happens? The security policy becomes the base document based on which systems get implemented in organization, processes get implemented in the organization, and audits are done against. That you're in compliance, the audit is done against something. The audit comes and sees whether you're complying to certain things. It's a compliance to a security policy. So it becomes the base document, and then that assures you a quality of the cyber security that gets implemented in the organization. So having a good security policy is important. So this is another area like what we have done there to have a minimum baseline for the security policy. There makes a case maybe like your organization to come up with a baseline for a security policy for enterprises. So here, that is when we are working now with the NCIPC, National Critical Information Infrastructure Protection Center. And there is a NCRF document, that is a National Cyber Security Reference Framework document that is in the works. That has gone through multiple iterations of industry consultation and stakeholder consultation. They have received lots of recommendations, and they are rewriting some of the chapters based on those recommendations. Hopefully, by around April, May, we should be coming up with the document. So now that has got, it becomes a reference document based on which you have some sort of a checklist about what an enterprise is supposed to do to see what are the systems that are there to put in place. They could take a conscious decision about what they want to do and what they don't want to do, and it would be a conscious decision that they take. So that is one, a national cyber security reference framework document that is in the works that we are trying to come out with. The other is, of course, an ACDS project that we have got, that is Adaptive Cyber Defense System, where, using open source tools that are available, we are creating a cyber security defense system, which, we could actually, an enterprise could use it. Because many a time, both the NCRF and the ACDS, many a time what happens is, it depends on the awareness level, the experience level, and the skill level of that individual in the organization, the type of cybersecurity architecture creates for himself. So to make it agnostic to that particular level of maturity of that particular individual, this NCRF should help. And this ACDS also should help in deploying solutions. So the ACDS deployments, we are doing a POC deployments. It's actually been lab tested now. And we are doing a POC, it's been done with IIT Bombay. Deployments in the SDLCs, that is state-led, load dispatch, SLDC, sorry. State load dispatch centers in 3 or 4 state load dispatch centers, it's getting deployed now. Plus in the Power Grid and Grid India, we are deploying those systems there. And once those are deployed, and of course also in the Bombay Stock Exchange. And once those get deployed there, based on the feedback that we got, we would like to improve the system and then offer it to anybody who wants to use it. We are also looking at system integrators who would take it forward and put it into enterprises, this ACDS system that is there. Yeah. Then the other important component of the cybersecurity is the security audits, and it's very important. We have this CERT empaneled auditors that we talk about, but there have been some deficiencies in that system, in the sense that, like you're the ISO quality management system or 27001, there's a checklist and they do it, but sometimes you find that if it's not properly implemented, you have issues with the actual, whether it's really that you are looking at some assurance level coming from the implementation of that. Many times it doesn't happen because the audits do not happen properly. Similarly, in the cybersecurity audit, there have been observations regarding audits not taking place properly. So we have created a small committee to actually go through the whole process again of the empanelment and come up with some mechanisms to see that there will be some changes that are coming in. Because there is a certification process about how do you onboard those individuals who can become auditors, and the companies also. But the mechanism to see that whether only those people are auditing or is not there in place. So these are some things that we are looking at to come up and then improve the empanelment process and also the audit process subsequent to that. Parallelly, looking at some of the supercritical infrastructure that we have in the country, like, the NPCI infrastructure, there is the Payment Corporation of India infrastructure, the Aadhaar infrastructure, we have GST and infrastructure that we have got. So there, we require a much more in-depth, look at it, and special skills that are required to see those things. So there, for that, we have done is that along with CDAC Hyderabad, we have created a audit team, recruited people, trained them at different places like the Carnegie Mellon University or some other places across, and then, created specific audit checklists and audit mechanisms for that, and there we are getting the audits done for that. So that is one's specific, and that is of course targeted. We specifically tell them to go and do an audit for that. Like, for example, the logistics of the Indian Railways. It's a very critical infrastructure for us. So there, you get the auditing done for that. So that is another area that, we are working on to see that. The other aspect is, at the national level, to have visibility into the traffic. It's very important to be predictive in looking at where the attacks are coming from. Many enterprises have their own firewalls and all of that. They do work on that. But at the national level, you should have visibility to see that if, for example, some attack is happening in a particular enterprise of a particular sector, if you have visibility into that, then we could warn enterprises, similarly placed enterprises of that particular sector in advance, to say that this is the type of attack that's happening, and then these are the mitigative measures that you kindly take in advance so that doesn't get repeated. Because if the attack happens there, it's a very good chance that, it's going to happen in other places. So we have something called the National Cyber Security Coordination Center in Delhi, where we pick up, the metadata with probes, and then there's another called the Telecommunication Security Operating Center, TSOC. So more than 130, 140, probes across the country picks up traffic, metadata, from to, and, the protocols that are being used. And at the big data analytics part, you do an analysis to find out, what are the type of attacks that are happening across the national level, and then do some predictive analysis, and then, forewarn organizations to take mitigative measures. So that is another activity where we look at even the BGP traffic that's happening, the DNS traffic that is happening, and the NTP traffic, and all of this, and then look at, and different protocols also that I say. So that is another activity that is happening. And here, we have, this problem of internet shutdowns that happens, because you in certain areas, you don't want access to certain content because it could be inflammatory content and all of that. And just because you want to stop access to certain content because we don't have mechanisms for that to happen, you find that local law enforcement asks for internet shutdowns to take place. So we are looking at that as a problem statement and see how is it that we can prevent that from happening. It's not really a cybersecurity issue, but definitely it's an access issue for people to access cyber resources. So we have done a POC on that in Delhi and in Jammu, where, based on certain services, certain protocols, certain URLs, we could determine, and then we could either whitelist what is to be allowed or blacklist what is not to be allowed, and then, provision that and do it. That's actually been tested, and and the committee has also evaluated the product. It's been good. It's been developed. Now it's a question of doing nationwide deployment so that, we get over this internet shutdowns that, we are coming across. And then people have access to the services, while at the same time providing, facility for the law enforcement to do the job that they are being entrusted by the citizens of this country that they should do. The responsibility that they've been entrusted to ensure that we are safe and secure. While they fulfill that responsibility, we also are in a position to avail the, cyber services that are there. So that is another area that, we're there. One of the things I talked about in the cybersecurity domain is regarding the robustness and all that. So when you talk in terms of testing and certifications, one is to come up with the requirements. What are the requirements against which I test and certify, isn't it? So for the 5G part of it, we have created a center in Bangalore itself called the National Center for Communication Security. It's actually spun off from a project that we did at IISc Bangalore. It started off with Professor Balki. We started off, And then from there, we spun off, and then we've created a center called the National Center for Communication Security. So they have come up with, they have been entrusted with the responsibility of coming with security requirements for network equipment, And for all the network equipment, 5G network equipment, they have come with security requirements. We have also told them to start working on the IoT security requirements, so that, IoT deployments are happening, and you will find that many of the IoT devices, that there's no thing called security in them. They look at functionality part of it, and then, deploy it. And then these are going to become, vectors for attacks, cyber attacks later on. So that is one area that we have given a project, IIT Hyderabad and this NCCS, to work on coming up with security requirements for IoT devices also. And there's another project for creating a national trust center for IoT devices. The TRI in 2017 had given a recommendation to the government that we should have a national trust center for IoTs. So where we have the IoT service providers, IoT vendors, IoT equipment, IoT, all of that could be onboarded into the trust center. So that is another one that has recently started. Around 6-7 months we started working on that. CDOT in Hyderabad, CDOT in Delhi has been entrusted with that responsibility of working along with all the industry stakeholders to come up with a national trust center. We've also created a national malware repository. It is already, that national malware repository has got more than 100 million malware samples on it now currently. And access has been provided to our agencies for, both for uploading the malware that they come across, and also for having access to the analysis reports from the repository. We plan to open it out to the academic community also, so that they can actually do malware research, analysis research on that. So that is one that it's already functional, but we have not opened it out to everybody because it's some sort of a internal evaluation mechanism that is happening. And we are also working on the legal documentation that is required before we provide access to the general public. So that, I think, would help in building in the country a base of researchers and a pool of researchers who would have expertise in malware analysis and coming up with mitigative measures for malware mitigation. Okay. There are certain points I would, then the other is on the ransomware, and then if people keep on talking about ransomware now, and that's something. See, ransomware happens when you have access. Once somebody has provided either through a phishing link or something, he could do anything, and ransomware is one of the consequences of that. So, but ransomware is something that we have to come live with it, One of the international cooperation mechanisms in ransomware is that counter ransomware initiative, CRI. More than 30 countries, including India, are part of it, and it's around nearly 2 years since that has started. And there are different verticals in which they're working. One is, of course, in capacity building. Other is in diplomatic, initiatives to take part on that. The technical measures that are there, and operational measures. So these are the different verticals under which people are working and trying to come up with a mechanism for countering ransomware. Even within the country, there's a task force that has been created under the Ministry of Home Affairs for the ransomware. Okay. And the CERT India is there, the Computer Emergency Response Team India. But considering the size of the country and the number of enterprises, the sectors which are there, CSIRTs are important. Sectoral CSIRT is important. The power sector, for example, has created CSIRT. And then the financial sector has got, the telecom sector is also created. It's important, each of the state governments also has got their own CSIRTs. So they have a response mechanism. It's humongously impossible for CERT India to respond to all the incidents that would happen in the country. So CSIRTs are an important component of, that, and the state governments, some of the state governments have come up with CSIRTs, and it's important that all the other states also come with CSIRTs. The other initiative that would be required is to have the ISACs, Information Sharing and Analysis Centers. Like in the US, for example, you have sectoral ISACs for the power sector, telecom, banking sector. So, in India also, it's important that you have the ISACs. For example, your organization, could be the ISAC for the state government here, so that you exchange information among, once in a quarter or once in a month, you could meet and then exchange, information about the latest trends that are happening in cybersecurity, and then the mitigative measures that each of the organizations have taken, so that learning percolates to other organizations, and that the cybersecurity posture and it really improves across organizations. So having ISACs, sectoral ISACs, is also important. We did, take an initiative to establish, for IDRBT, for example, has been designated as ISAC for the banking and financial sector. Similarly, for the telecom sector also, we pushed the industry for doing that. They established a platform, created user ID password for those telecom service providers to anonymously exchange information about cybersecurity incidents on that, so that they have visibility into all of that. I'll not say it's been a very successful, endeavor. But this is one area I think we could really work on to create this ISACs. Many of the like for in Japan, I had a chance to interact with them. They have an ISAC which is just a tabletop exercise, like once a month or something, they come and meet in a room. All of them, the CTOs or the CISOs, they come and meet in a room and then exchange notes. So that is one thing that they talk about. Okay. Another challenge in the country is, a lot of our enterprises, cybersecurity products they come about, the main complaint that they have is that they don't have a market. People don't purchase the products because they're not proven products. They don't have any deployments that are there currently in the market. Now, how do we address this problem is, I think the POC route, the proof of concept route is one thing that we have to go forward. And one good example of that is the BSNL 4G tender. When the BSNL 4G tender happened, and then for around 100,000 BTSs, base stations, the conditions normally are that you should have had around 100,000 deployments or 200,000 deployments, 4 or 5 deployments in 3 or 4 countries. These are the sort of, and this much of financial muscle and all of that. That really does not help an Indian company which is just developed a product to showcase and then come on. They will not be able to bid at all. So we approached and then we recommended from our office also that the tender should be cancelled, and then we should promote indigenization. And the way forward would be for an Indian company, for us to have a POC, a proof of concept. There would be no dilution in the standards per se. If the 3GPP standards are there, if we are talking of release 16, it should comply to release 16 of 3GPP. If you want release 17, it should comply to release 17 of 3GPP. Whatever you are kept, don't dilute those standards, but provide an opportunity for having a POC. So we went through the POC route. We, of course, initially said we should have a POC of around a period of 9 months. It went beyond 9 months, up to 1 year. So those, equipment were deployed, they were tested, feedback was given, improvements were done. Finally, the products could be proven, and the current deployment of the 4G that's happening in BSNL is through indigenous solution. Tejas from here is providing the radios, Tata Consultancy Services along with C-Dot is providing the core, and the Tata Consultancy Services providing integration services also. So that's a completely indigenously developed 4G solution that is getting deployed in a large scale, 100,000 base stations across the country. Now that itself, is a good example of how, we're working with the industry to see that an Indian solution through a POC route without dilution of any of the standards, we have been able to get it on. We have the capability in this country to have indigenous solutions. It's just a question about how do we work to see that first thing is we have to firmly believe that we want an Indian solution to develop. Then we have to look at what is the path we have to follow to see that it is successful. If you follow the traditional methods, you're not going to get any forward. We'll get where we were earlier. We have to look at new methods of saying how do we help Indian vendors to prove their products and then deploy those products in our networks. So especially in the cybersecurity domain, we have to help. We have to go through this route of having a POC and then dispensing with, when the POC has been successful, technically proven, then dispensing with some of these criteria of the prior deployments and all, because the POC is already done, shown to you that it is a viable product that you have got in your hand. You should be going ahead with. That is one thing I think I would like to bring to your notice. And from our office, we're very keen that because security, especially with cybersecurity products, the amount of privileged access that these products have, nothing else has. You all would be aware. Cybersecurity products have the most privileged access to systems. And if they are compromised, you can imagine what is the state. So it's important, especially for cybersecurity products, that we have indigenous capacity and capability developed within the country. Okay. So these are, some of the points that I thought I would share with you. And there's a lot of work that is happening within the government also. There is a R&D fund that we administer from our office. And we, ask for problem statements, and then we reach out to institutions which work on those problem statements. And as I've said, some of these like, the NCCC or TSOC, that traffic, metadata capture and analysis with probes at 400 Gbps. The probes are able to take, each probe actually ability to capture traffic at the rate of 400 Gbps. Now we are working on a probe to capture traffic at the rate of 800 Gbps. So that's a project that we have given. So all of those are things that we're working on. Plus deployment of intelligent honeypots. This is a project from CDAC Mohali. Across the country, honeypots have been deployed. Now we are working on honeypots that are peculiar to the telecom sector and the power sector. General honeypots have been deployed across the country, but specifically intelligent honeypots, which are sector specific, are also getting developed and deployed. So there's a lot of work that's happening. But as I said, there's a lot of expertise that is there in the private sector, and we have to work together, and we from the government has to leverage the expertise that is there in the private sector to see as a country. And as I said at the beginning, it's not like protecting your land borders. It's like that the whole of the country has to be protected now, because the enemy could be right here in this room, because the access is provided that way. So we have to protect across the country, and all the citizens, in both in terms of capacity development, technology development, deployments, processes, everywhere you'll have to say that, we have to work together and see that we are successful. But, to end on a positive note, I've been in this domain for some time now. 2014 is when I first came into this domain of security. So I'll tell you, even if I go back 2 years and then see where we are from 2 years back, I'll say there's a lot of development that has happened. So there's a lot of development that is happening in the sense. And it's not that, all the sectors are at the same level. There's a level of maturity in the banking which is very high, telecom was very high, but I will not say the same of other sectors. So there's a level of learning that has to happen. We have to cross-pollinate across this expertise that is there in one sector to other sectors, and then as a country develop, So thank you very much for giving this opportunity and sharing my thoughts, views, and whatever work we are doing with you. Thank you.